Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex. Today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including why the Latino vote cannot be taken for granted in 2024, a story about how Elon Musk and SpaceX have successfully caught their spaceship shuttle after launching the first part of it, which is a big achievement. And then a story about the blue economy and how this could actually turn into a greenwashing situation. It's actually a fascinating article about the stakes. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, if you had to guess what the split is of Latino voters that vote Democrat versus Republican this year, before you listen to the article, what do you think it is? I want everybody's off the top of the head kind of numbers. Throw them down there in the comment section. For everybody who has been commenting, greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. If you don't do it on this one, not a big deal, but when you show your support, we absolutely love it. All right, so let's jump to our first article that comes from the Washington Examiner. The headline reads, "Why the Latino Vote is in Play for the First Time Since 2004. So when you read a headline like that, many things come to mind. You sit back and you ask yourself, okay, was it really in play before? Was Joe Biden actually getting it? Was Trump boosting his numbers in that specific demographic? Was it in play in 2016? I'd feel like it really wasn't. It was pretty locked in 2012. So you start to do the mental math and you say, okay, I guess you can make an argument. Maybe it was a little bit more in play during the 2020 election, but especially with how we've seen the polls change over time, this is the closest it's been and the highest ceiling that Donald Trump has been able to get in his 3 times running for office with the Latino community. So we really have to start breaking this down. We have to try to understand where this support is coming from, what their key issues are, because no longer are they just a locked-in demographic. And some Republicans have been treating them like such for a while. Some other ones have always thought that they were more in play, especially after seeing the 2004 kind of victory that Mr. Bush had. And then again, jokes were always made, well, we just need to learn Spanish. And no, I don't think that's necessarily the way that you have to go about it, because whether or not anybody speaks English or they speak any other language within the United States of America, more than likely they are going to feel the pain of different issues, whether it be immigration, whether it be the economy, whether it be foreign policy. For all we know, maybe you have family members in a state that we're currently going head to head with, and you don't necessarily have to speak English in order to understand that there are negative repercussions for the people back home, so on and so forth. So that old trope of, oh, well, hey, we're just going to have to start speaking Spanish to them, while that does help with accessibility, allowing this new demographic to actually have access to the playing field, that doesn't change the fact that these issues resonate with everybody, no matter what race you are, no matter what language you speak. So I think this is a good article to start breaking it down and start to understand where these shifts in the demographic of Latinos is actually hitting home. What issues are actually playing really well with them. Quote, "But with more than 36 million Latino voters eligible to vote in 2024, an increase from 32.3 million in 2020, the demographic shift is undeniable. A survey conducted by Unidos US, released in September found that 2024 election will be the first presidential election in which 23% of Latinos will be voting in, with 37% of the voting bloc being new since the 2016 election versus Trump and former Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton." So we have an influx. We have more people who are not only coming into the country and making the demographic itself larger, therefore increasing the community, increasing the connections, allowing this culture to thrive within the United States or create a subculture, so to speak, but also more of these people are actually eligible to vote. So that means we got to step back and really understand that you can't just leave them by the wayside. And I know, anybody who listens to politics regularly knows my talking points here, because it's true. They are a demographic that is in play, pretending that they are not, pretending that we can just look past them, pretending that they're locked into one side or the other. It's the stupidest thing ever. It's like how Republicans approach certain demographics within cities. They just assume, okay, people that live in cities, you know what, they're probably not going to vote for us. They're going to vote blue no matter who. And sure, that may be true 90 maybe 80% of the time, maybe 70% of the time. And then again, that is still a generalization. That doesn't mean you don't come and talk to them and you don't ask them, wait, what's really hurting for you? What do you need us to try to solve? What are the problems that I can try to address on a national scale? Because as I talked about before, immigration may not affect everybody. That's one of the issues that doesn't necessarily affect everybody equally, though some Republican governors have made attempts to make that the case, especially getting these immigrants into places that are normally considered sanctuary cities so that they can possibly feel the effects of the policies that they are advocating for, or at least saying they care about. But one that hits everybody is inflation in the economy. And that is why the phrase, it's the economy, stupid, resonates. It doesn't mean that it is the end all be all. Everybody has their own priorities. My priority on the economy is not necessarily sitting back and saying that I need inflation to be at a certain percent. I need the egg prices to not be going up by 2 cents per week. That's not exactly why I care about the economy. It makes my life 100% easier, but the allowing of innovation and the free market mechanism to actually boost what is working versus what is not working, allowing for lower amounts of centralization in the economy and less regulation that is not actually beneficial. And I would even say even beneficial is a bit of a borderline term. I would say less regulation in general. So all of those sort of things are important to me for the economy, not necessarily just inflation. But the reason that people say the economy is stupid is because everybody in your nation experiences the inflation. Everybody. And I sound like Donald Trump. The inflation. Everybody experiences the inflation. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to do my impression of him. But the point being that it hits every single person in their home, whether they are buying school books for their kids, whether they're buying food for their kids, or even themselves, or even dog food. All of these things get more expensive, and it is an issue that resonates with everybody. Immigration doesn't resonate with everybody. Foreign policy, some people don't care about what we're doing around the world. Some people do, but some people do not. When it comes to housing, some people and most people care about housing. Most people care about being able to have an affordable place to live. So that one's on closer to the top. But there are some people who are content with just renting, or they're content with not necessarily worrying about housing. Then again, that is a really, really small percentage of the population. So you could say that's another roundabout issue. So the reason I'm leading on about the economy is because guess what? Guess what these surveys have said? Latinos, they really, really care about the community. Just the community, the economy. They do care about their communities, of course. They want to foster their communities. But also, they care about the economy. Quote, an NBC Telemundo CBS poll released earlier this month found Harris holding 54% support among registered Latino voters compared to Trump's 40%, with 6% reporting they wouldn't vote or are unsure. The margin of error in the poll was plus or minus 3.1 percentage points. The poll, if the numbers hold, puts Harris 11 points behind President Joe Biden's 2020 performance among Latinos. And why is that? That's the end of the quote. So why is that? What is she not bringing to the table that Joe Biden brought to the table? What else is Trump bringing to the table? Well, here is some of the points that the article brings up. Quote, contrary to popular belief, any idea that Latinos care the most about immigration is a, quote, relic of the identity politics that Democrats allow themselves to be consumed by, end quote, according to Republican operative Mike Madrid, end quote. So, you see, we have some misconceptions, apparently, or at least the common knowledge, the common going knowledge that they care the most about immigration. I don't know. So if we're to do an anecdotal evidence here, let's be clear. I agree the economy is probably their number one issue, as it is most people's issue. And even if it's not number one issue in the way that they see them voting or their politics manifesting, so to speak, it is actually affecting the way that they vote because it is materially affecting their life. And what I mean by that is some people aren't going to sit back and say, yes, the economy is my high-minded political issue. But some people are going to say, well, eggs are more expensive now, and I couldn't afford X, Y, and Z this year when I could afford it 4 years ago. So maybe I should vote for the person that was in 4 years ago. That is the economy, but some people don't necessarily think about it as the economy. So let's actually go into some of Madrid's quoting here. Quote, over the past 20 years, there has been no evidence to suggest that Latino voters are anything other than economic issue voters, Madrid said. Quote, some of that also has to do with what issues they care about, right? So for a long time, if politicians even bothered to talk about this electorate, they had made the assumption that the only thing they cared about was immigration, which was wrong. And that quote comes from Martinez de Castro. So look at that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. They care about the economy. Is this really any surprise to anybody? I thought it was funny when I was reading through this article, because if you've truly been living underneath the false assumption that people care more about immigration than they care about the economy, in a population of people who come to the United States in order to have economic opportunities, as well as possible family opportunities, a better life, maybe even a spiritual life, because they feel that they might be oppressed in their state. That's fair enough. But a majority of these people don't just come seeking asylum for any random reason. They come because they don't necessarily have the opportunities in order to grow and thrive in their nation. And guess what? America, we take in the huddled masses and we provide an economic, basically, island. Right now, it's basically an island. There are other places that provide the same opportunities. I'm not trying to get it twisted, but for the longest time, we most definitely have been the economic island that is floating in the middle of the ocean. Everybody's just trying to get to us. Now things are changing a little bit, but still a large segment of the population that has easy access to, and I say easy, it's not anywhere easy. It's not anyhow easy to cross multiple jungles and go through cartel-ridden areas in order to get to the United States. But you don't have to swim across the Atlantic, so it's easier than coming from Africa in some cases. So, of course, the segment of the chunk of the population that would be trying to get into America and get to the island are the people that are actually closest to the island. Imagine South America is just a little separate island that's only 50 meters away, and you can swim over to the United States, versus Africa that may be a separate island that's 100 meters away, or Europe, which is a separate island, which is then another 100 meters away. And it's not necessarily easy always if you are someone who is having a hard economic life in these other countries in order to actually get to the United States and get some of these benefits. But if you're on the same landmass, so to speak, because even though they're separate continents, we are connected, then it's a little bit easier. So you can understand why the demographic split would be people who are of from Latin America coming to the United States. But that does not mean that their key issue is immigration, just because they have an easier time of getting here. And I say easier still in quotes. And we have a larger segment of the population that is Latino now. That doesn't necessarily mean, oh, well, you know what? I came to this country and I had to go through a port of entry, or I had to come across the border illegally, but I found my opportunities now and I want to make sure everybody else has an opportunity. No, they came here for the economic opportunities. So, of course, the economy is going to be one of their top issues. Then again, as you see assimilation through the generations, maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe as you have people who are born into America, who are learning from our society, who are a part of the critical examination of America as a state and possibly the undermining of its values, sure, I could see you have those generations that say, well, my family came here from Guatemala. They were able to make something of themselves. They were able to have me, and I don't want to deny somebody else that opportunity. But a lot of the first generation immigrants are coming here because they want economic opportunity. So to pretend as though they wouldn't care about this in an electoral battle, considering in theory they're supposed to become citizens, then they can gain the right to vote. It takes a long time. They're really heavily invested if they're voting. Like, come on, guys. The fact that this was even a discussion, that this was even an article, don't get me wrong. It's important to always discuss that these sort of things are in play. They're in flux. We don't want to deny it. But also, it just kind of took me back, like, is it not the economy stupid? Like, is it the economy stupid for everybody? But nope, not Latinos. Nope, we're just going to exclude them on this one. Now, obviously, it came down to the economy, and I don't blame anybody for it. I don't blame anybody who lives in this country for caring about how much it costs costs you to get from point A to point B when you're buying gas. I don't care that they sit back and they say, you know what, it's really hard to grab those pork tenderloins that I used to absolutely love not that long ago, and now we can't afford them. Of course, the economy is going to be the top of the list because the economy directly affects how you live. And if you're coming to America in order to have a better life, have access to more goods, more better goods, which is an interesting phrase, but better goods and more of them, then when you get here, if you're strangled by the inflation within the economy of the nation, is that really better? No, you care about the economic situation. So that was enough ranting on that one. I know that I went a little bit overboard, especially there with the immigration analogy, but I think it's important to really highlight that while immigration can be a very important issue, if you're coming here for a very specific reason, that reason may actually dictate how you vote when you get here. I'm just saying. Then again, other people come to escape asylum. There's no denying that. But those numbers are far and few between the amount of people that come here for economic asylum, so to speak. The ability to actually lift themselves up and possibly send remittances and lift up their family and get them to the United States as well. But that's, like I said, that's enough on that one. Let's go to our second article that comes from ABC News. Headline reads, in an engineering feat, mechanical SpaceX arms catch Starship rocket booster back at the launch pad. Now, when I first saw this morning, because I'm recording this right before it goes out, and I read this story this morning, this is a huge step. So we know for a while now that when they were trying to send up the little Falcons, that those are the first supply ships, so to speak, that they were sending up that they could release their satellites from. And they started having the boosters land back on the pads in the ocean. That was a big moment. Okay, one or two of them failed the first time, but some of them landed, and now they've been doing it for a long time. They're able to reuse these rockets. It cuts down on costs because they don't have to spend millions remaking them. Well, guess what? Starship has had even more money thrown into it. There's, I think, at least triple the amount of boosters that are rockets/boosters that are on a normal flight that they've been sending up. So that's a lot of extra money, and they also have to put in a lot of extra heat shielding because they wanted to be able to go into space in the future and then actually be able to come back down into Earth. So all of these different components make it very, very expensive. So this is a great way to cut costs when you're actually able to catch the thing that you just launched up into the air. But that's enough on the economics. We'll get back to it here in a little bit, but let's actually absorb the feat itself and appreciate what is going on here. Quote, towering almost 400 feet, 121 meters, the empty Starship blasted off at sunrise from the southern tip of Texas near the Mexican border. It arched over the Gulf of Mexico like the 4 Starships before it that ended up being destroyed, either soon after liftoff or while ditching into the sea. The previous one in June had been the most successful until Sunday's demo, completing its flight without exploding. So, remember when Musk said basically, well, yeah, they're going to explode. I mean, we have to learn from these sort of experiences. That's why we have a safety area kind of thing. His little sarcastic remarks about, well, yeah, I mean, they're probably going to explode as we're figuring everything out. I mean, if you don't destroy something along the way, how are you going to learn? And I know he didn't say it exactly like that, but Musk's comments are always hilarious, and it will go down in history with some of his quotes, which are very, very, he's not a risk-averse person, let's put it that way. He's very open to risk, and that is kind of counter to our culture, and that's why he's such a person who is fascinating to a lot of people within our nation. But this is just another example of taking those risks. He's had 4 of these starships basically not necessarily fully destroyed, but some of them blowing up, some of them not necessarily having the ability to make it into orbit, or in this case specifically actually be able to catch them with quote-unquote the chopsticks. And yes, you heard that correctly. Quote, at the flight director's command, the first stage booster flew back to the launch pad where it had blasted off 7 minutes earlier. The launch tower's monstrous metal arms, dubbed chopsticks, caught the descending 232-foot, 71-meter stainless steel booster and gripped it tightly, dangling it well above the ground. So they actually got it to return. They got it safely. They got it locked in. Now, Eventually, I believe the idea is to actually have the entire Starship be catchable. Now, I don't necessarily know if that is still on track. I know that currently the NASA, or the space agency here in the United States, is actually trying to contract some of these out for some of the Artemis missions in order to resupply, in order to possibly get people there as well, even though they have their own plans as well to actually get people to the moon. But the whole point is, this is a great step in the right direction. This is also a big moment for human innovation. And why do you say that? Because we conserve energy with this move. If we are going to become a multiplanetary species, which some people don't want to be, some people do want to be. I'm not trying to get into the argument of whether or not we should be, because I've actually already done like a Twitter tirade on this before. I've even done a podcast about it. So that's not necessarily the point that I'm trying to get to. But the question whether or not we become one is less important when you have to ask, can we even do it? Okay, so if you have a philosophical musing about these sort of things and say, oh, should we become one? But you don't even have the capability to do it, it doesn't matter. Now we possibly have the capability to do it. But one thing you always have to remember, and I made a point about this in one of my previous podcasts, the rate at which societies expand / grow is normally correlated with the amount of energy that they're able to produce and use efficiently. So imagine how, and you can maybe even make a corollary to money, even though money is kind of a figment, because energy does cost money, but that's besides the point. How much energy do you save when you do not have to rebuild these rockets individually every single time? You save a lot of money, but you also save a lot of energy. You save labor, you save time, which then can be redirected in other places. This is a huge step. Being able to actually conserve the work that people have put in for multiple years, if not extra months, after they found one issue that they've had to fix, like warping in the panels or something to that effect. This allows us to cut down on all of that. And it makes it much more feasible to turn around the launches as well. And what I mean by that is, well, instead of having to build, so let's say you couldn't actually reuse the rocket, so to speak, then you would either have to have a really fast assembly line, being able to put them together super precisely, which is questionable with engines, because you have to make sure that everything's not going to blow up on you, because though Elon Musk is okay with things blowing up, I'm not sure NASA is when their payload is on top. So you would either have to have an extremely fast production process, or you would have to basically create so many of them ahead of time that you can actually manufacture them faster than you're launching them, which, fair enough, that's a possibility, but why not actually produce all those same amount of starships and have them all be able to return? Because then you're cutting down on the amount of extra waste that goes into the ocean. You're cutting down on the amount of hours of these brilliant minds that are obviously creating spectacular technology here being wasted on just fixing the same old thing and making sure everything's aligned properly. And I'm sure you can get robots for that, but imagine just the pure amount of savings that you get from basically the largest, I don't want to say it's the largest, but basically one of the greatest innovations in private industry in a long time. And when you're trying to thrust humankind into a new era, that sort of savings, that reusability, that innovation alone, the fact that you can reuse it is a beautiful innovation alone that is powerful and representative of how we can actually move forward and not only use something, blow it up, and be done with it, but actually have a sustainable future. That's symbolic all on its own. But the fact that the innovation is coming from a space company, it kind of makes me giddy. And maybe that's why I'm a little bit overly excited about it. Maybe that's why I'm giving it a little bit of extra time. Maybe that's why I'm bloviating a little bit, because I absolutely love the idea. I love the idea of not just America, not just Europe, not just Africa, not just Oceania, not just South America, not just Asia. One of these places going up and having a location that you go to on the moon, that we can harvest resources, that we can gain more access to water. Guess what happens as we go into as we go into space? No longer do we have to pollute our own planet. Then again, the argument will be, then we'll pollute space. Fair enough. Space is a huge expanse, and hopefully we can learn to do things better as we have here on Earth. We can also do it there. We can take those lessons out into space, but we have access to more rare minerals, which means more things that, one, it's going to crash the prices of some rare minerals here on Earth, which is fair enough, but that means more materials to make more goods with, more innovation is possible because we may find new elements. You don't forget the fact that we have a water problem here on Earth. Now that we can go into space with reusable rockets, in theory, we could capture water from other comets and these sort of things. Basically, more access to resources. We don't necessarily have to harm our own planet. Yes, I understand people are going to say, well, only the people that are going to have the biggest money are going to be able to actually benefit from space, which is an interesting argument. Fair enough. Then again, innovation comes in all shapes and forms. Remember, a lot of our key innovations within the 20th century came from military contracts back with the United States and Britain during World War II and even in Germany. So remember that there are trickle-down effects. There will be some things that are kept at the top. There's no denying that. But just the pure amount of extra resources, the possible new fuels, the ability to harness more energy. I mean, imagine having a giant solar array directly outside of our atmosphere, which actually slightly diminishes the amount of UV rays that we're able to capture. So all these different possibilities are there. And as I talked about before, the ability of a society to harness energy is one of the factors that allows us to understand how, or not just harness, but actually use energy consumption allows that society to thrive. The more energy we are able to use, I mean, in theory, you could say the more energy we're able to put towards AI computing, the further along we'll get in these really fancy and advanced simulations, or the more energy we're able to put into production of XYZ product or XYZ process. And my whole point is that this opens up a new frontier, and that is why I'm fascinated, and that is why I very much am excited when I hear about a starship being caught in chopsticks, even though that sounds like such an ironic statement, but it is quintessentially Elon Musk. All right, so let's jump to our final article, which is about the blue economy, or as it will probably be called here soon, because the environmental activists are already on it, it might be called blue washing. So this article is a very, very long article, and it doesn't necessarily do it justice to just throw it in at the end. So you should probably go read it yourself. And by probably, I mean if you have an extra, I would say 20 minutes. I'm a pretty slow reader, but most people could probably get through it in 15 to 20 minutes. If you have an extra 20 minutes, go read it. The idea that this author is getting at is that when the UN, when multiple nations, when corporations try to create these protected zones across the world in different parts of the ocean, whether it be at shipwrecks or it be at natural resource or natural beauties such as coral reefs, mangroves, things like this. They are also potentially taking advantage of these locations, or they're leaving them to be on their own while saying they're doing something and then going and exploring the deep ocean and starting to do mining projects there. Like they point out here in this article, Norway's parliament has recently said that they are trying to do deep water exploration, which is fair enough. They want to have more resources for some of these key minerals that are going to be used in EV cars, such as cobalt, manganese. So as we start to go into this era where obviously we're exploring space, we're also exploring the deep ocean now, we're gaining more information day after day after day about the world around us. These activists are basically saying we need to make sure that we're not doing all of this at the cost of our oceans, and that some of these projects that are being proposed by the UN, by the most powerful nations, the first world nations that have the ability to make high-minded proclamations about the environment, that they are not actually negatively affecting these regions that we're actually implementing them in. One great example they give is from a nation in Africa where they actually created a protected zone, and it was not just, the government is coming in and saying, no, you're not allowed to do this anymore. It was actually in partnership with the local community and making sure that the local community understood why you can't actually go out and mass harvest fish. You can do it in an artisanal manner. And while this could and probably does stunt the ability of that community to grow because they don't have access or the ability to access the abundant amount of foods and therefore calories and therefore energy. Look at this. It's an energy episode. Oh my goodness. But while it could stunt their growth, at least they were doing it in partnership with this community, and the community had a buy-in, and therefore they're seeing positive ecological effects in the area. So we need to make sure, if we're going to have these programs, we need to make sure that the local people are bought in. That doesn't mean that we should restrict everybody's ability to grow and thrive and have access to the natural resources that are underneath their feet. We can't be a dictator or authoritarian. But if you are going to propose some of these things, you have to make sure that the local communities, the people that will be directly affected, are bought in. And while I don't agree with everything in this article, I do agree with that, because at the end of the day, if it's your land and your community's land, you guys got a little bit of a right to determine how that's going to go down. That's why private property is a thing. That is why we have private property. So to pretend as though anybody can be left out of these sort of decisions by large governments who just mandate that something be the way it is, one, it's probably going to backfire because that community doesn't buy in. But two, it's not actually going to, first off, it's unethical, just mandating somebody do something with their own land, but it's not going to have the effects that you want, and it may have irreversible negative damage. So with that said, let's move on to something a little bit more positive. Let's go to our daily delight. This one will hopefully leave a little bit of a smile on your face. This is a cockatoo eating on TikTok and leaving no crumbs. And this guy, honestly, the picture for this article, it is he looks a little bit crazy, but if you go and actually watch the TikTok video, this guy's absolutely adorable. It's not necessarily about the fact that he's leaving no crumbs. It's just that he's kind of persistent. He's cute. He'll put a smile on your face. I promise you that much. So if you want to find that, or you want to read any of today's articles, they'll all be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.